I'm going to talk a little bit about the draft. What is a draft? And have we had one during your lifetime at all, Aaron?
Isn't it like a list where people would like sign up for something?
Yes, yes, and specifically, usually the word draft relates to signing up for what, Polly? The military, yeah. So what happens is, and actually, Aaron, once you turn 18, the government will send you a draft card, and you have to register for the draft, which means that in the case of wartime where we don't have enough men and women already in our military, volunteer men and women in our military, we have to select at random young people to serve in the military.
Cool.
Yeah. So look forward to that. No, I'm kidding. But we haven't had a draft in a long time, and typically a draft is not something that has to occur. It never has to occur, but that's sort of that's a disagreement among people. But anyway, so we have some, for people who oppose war for either religious or moral reasons, those people are what we call conscientious objectors, right? They're objecting to being part of the war, part of the military. So the book mentions a specific example, Alvin York, who actually ironically ended up being one of like the most renowned heroes of World War I. So he actually eventually decided to go to war and help fight, but initially he was very much against it, and so he was one of the protesters against this whole draft issue. But anyway, during the middle of the war, actually 3 years into the war, the United States still really wasn't involved directly. We hadn't entered it yet. So at this point, we decided that it was necessary. So Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, declared war, and they came up with the draft, because at that time the American Army wasn't super large or strong in comparison to that of Germany or Great Britain or France. So we had to kind of quickly get some things together. The book talked a little bit about how women were not part of the draft, but a lot of women did help out during the war in non-combat positions. So they weren't fighting, but they were doing other things like acting as nurses and war secretaries and probably cooks and things like that. So they helped out in those roles. We also had a lot of black soldiers in World War I, but they were segregated still, obviously, because it wasn't until the 1960s really that we had a full coming together of all of the races. So they had their own units within the war which they fought with. So kind of an interesting thing, the draft. It always brings up a lot of controversy there. So once we actually entered the war, we had a lot of success. And something that we had to do before we could get in, though, was to create all of these ships. Why would we have wanted to create a strong fleet of ships for ourselves? What was going on? We talked about this yesterday a little. Olivia?
We had to transport across seas, and the Germans had the really big U-boats to attack.
Yes. So because the war was not going on in our country, we had to get ourselves there to help fight it. And then also, once we got there, we had to defend ourselves against the German U-boats, right? And the German U-boats were trying to block the British naval fleet. So it was kind of like this long succession of people defending each other. Okay, so we came up with what was called a convoy system, and this was a military strategy for getting our ships safely over to Europe. So the convoy system basically was like kind of like a gang of ships, if you will, and there was like the defense ship called the destroyer, and the destroyer did just that. It was in charge of trying to destroy submarines, the German submarines, as we came into contact with them. And then, behind the destroyer, were our like civilian ships and the ships that were bringing over goods and war supplies and things that we needed. So this allowed us to get over there somewhat safely. Otherwise, if we had just individual ships sailing over, it would have been a lot easier for the German U-boats to target us and take us down. So General Pershing, he was the head Army general for the United States during World War I, and he is considered to be very persistent, but obviously somewhat of a hero. His tactics allowed Americans to go in and really help and win the war eventually. So, but what happened was that America came in kind of just to help out as extra, extra soldiers. But Pershing didn't want for us to just blend in with the soldiers of the other countries. He wanted for us to go in and say, here we are as Americans, we're fighting as a team here, and we would like to be recognized for our efforts, rather than just providing like supplementary support. So we tried to keep everybody together. And then, because we had so many Americans helping to fight, we were able to help turn the tide, they say, or basically just switch win, basically, because Germany had been really pounding everybody before. So Germany finally relented, and they were willing to sign an armistice or a peace agreement. A lot of Germans themselves became very upset with the fact that Germany kept taking this pounding, but millions of people were starving there because of the British blockade. They didn't have any food, and just it was awful. A lot of disease. So anyway, they finally were able to overthrow the Kaiser, who was the German leader at the time, and they formed democracy instead, at least for a little while. So in 1918, then the war is officially over. So it lasted for 4 years, 1914 to 1918. So this is just kind of the bulk of the war. I mean, it kind of started and over quick, at least in the book. But I do want to talk about some of the casualties. I don't know if anybody looked at the chart or not, but on page 408, there's a chart of World War I casualties. And casualties are just deaths resulting from a war. And this is the total number of deaths. And this includes troops, so the people who are fighting, but it also includes civilians, right? Just regular people who were not in the war necessarily, but they happen to unfortunately die because of the war. Maybe because of disease, maybe they got caught in the crossfire, maybe they starved to death. Okay, any number of things. But if you look here, up at the top it says total troops mobilized, meaning that this is the total number of troops that were actually in the war effort. They were literally mobilized, meaning moving around, either fighting or helping out with the war effort in some way. So for the Allies, and of course the United States was on the side of the Allies, we had, 43 sub-million troops. And the Central Powers, which was Germany as the main force, and then Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, kind of helping out there, they had, roughly half that. And the reason why we had so many wars, because we had way more countries involved in that alliance with the Allies. So if you look at the total casualties, poor Russia. Russia had 9 million people that died. 9 million, that's a lot. And if you take a look at the total numbers for the United States, how many did we have? I'm still way more than, one casualty is way too many, right? One casualty, one death is horrible. We had 325,000. Now compared with 9 million, that's sort of a drop in the bucket. But why would we have had so many less deaths in the war than Russia, or any of these other countries for that matter, Paige? Yeah, we were only there the last year of it, and also our side won, so we probably took out more people than we had taken out, right? So it makes logical sense in that way. Good. So let's talk about some of the problems then that the United States faced. This was one of your questions to answer. Really, there were a multitude of things that you could put here. We've already talked in class about problems with wartime, and there are a lot of obvious problems with war. The book also talks about some specific problems that went on during World War I. So, somebody give me an example. What was one thing that you put on your chart, Aaron?
Sorry, disease?
Yeah, disease. Actually, one of the numbers that I wrote down, let's see, maybe I found it online instead. Oh yeah, it says this in the book. Deaths numbered about 26 million. So overall, from World War I, 26 million people died. Half of them were civilians who died as a result of disease. So that's quite a few, right? 13 million people died just from disease, not even like having been in the war fighting. And that's typical. That's typical for wartime. It also said in the book that this war cost the whole world $350 billion, which that could, I don't know that even that number of dollars existed at that time in the world. I think they're just trying to show that it was too costly to even be realistic. So it was just an outrageous war with way too many nations involved. Good, so disease was a major problem. What else, Paige?
Before the war started, like as we were going through the drafts and deciding how we were gonna do it, picking people who went into like most of the officers didn't have combat experience, and so like the training was more difficult.
Yes, yes. So not only did training take a lot of time, but it took resources, money, people to train these guys. And obviously, once we decided to get involved with the war, we wanted to do it right away, but we couldn't necessarily. We had to prepare for it. Good. What else, Olivia?
I know it said Germany, but I think some of the other countries America fought against had like more advanced weapons, so we were kind of at a disadvantage for that.
Yes, we were. Some very creepy weaponry and military tactics came into play in World War I, and they have a few pictures on page 406. Does anybody remember what some of the new either strategies or technologies were during World War I?
They had, Germany especially had poison gas, so they would like use as bombs. And
Yes.
so I know like we talked about having gas masks become like common apparel for like everyone to wear during wartime.
Yeah, and that was an easy way to wipe out, hundreds or thousands of people at one time, as opposed to just using a gun, which could, you'd have to go from person to person. Yeah, Aaron?
The Gatling gun.
What's that?
The Gatling gun.
The Gatling gun, yeah. And what did the Gatling gun do?
Basically, it could fire a lot more rounds and was way faster than the other gun that the Germans used.
Yeah, so
I've seen them in action.
Yeah, these machine guns, 600 rounds or something you
Yeah.
could fire, as the book said. So again, taking out a high multitude of people in a short amount of time. Let's see here, we also had tanks, and probably everybody's seen a tank before at some point, either in real life or maybe at a museum or something like that. Hopefully not just, out and about. But, or you might have seen one in a documentary or something. So, what was the advantage of tanks? Why were tanks even created? What could they do? Aaron?
They supplied a lot more defense and could hit way harder than an entire troop of guys.
Yeah, so they were kind of these big barges that slowly rolled on like a kind of almost a conveyor belt type deal, and they were for the most part bulletproof, so the guys could stay inside. Meanwhile, they have these shooters that could.
Unless you threw a grenade in there.
Yeah, right. Inside of it though, you would have had to get inside of it.
You could probably just like throw it through the cannon thing.
Oh, that's true. Oh, yeah, yeah. So
I've seen
either
it.
way, you'd be getting
That's
insect.
really hard to
I've
do.
seen
But they would be,
That would
yeah,
be-
so
But I
that
you're
would
on
be
that.
difficult.
But I have seen it been done before.
You have seen that been done before, okay, yeah, so I'm sure that was done, right? They had to figure out some way to get to these tanks, so, yeah. And the tanks could, you know, they're so heavy and so, the metal from which they're made is so strong that they can just kind of bulldoze over anything, you know, buildings, people, anything. So, very, very innovative. I mean, it's horrible to talk about how good weapons were, but the tanks really helped out a lot in World War I. So, let's continue. Let's do this for tomorrow. Let's hold off on reading the next section because I want to keep talking about this section. There was a lot that happened, and I have some more notes still. So, no homework for tonight. We'll just finish this tomorrow, and then we'll move on from there. Maddie, did you have a question?
Oh,
No?
I'm fine.
Okay. Olivia?
Are we, I'm guessing no, but current events this week?
No,
Okay.
no.
If
Yeah.
this is gonna be a long answer, I can wait till tomorrow.
That's okay.
But did we ever have like bomb dropped on the US during World War One?
I don't believe so.
It was just because we came in later, because like
Well,
some
yeah,
people would've
and,
fought
and,
back.
and all of the fighting was going on in
Oh,
Europe.
right, so it would've been just like